Hello, my name is Howard Breyer. I'm the presenter for tonight's uh, presentation on Miami Beach Jewish history. There's two parts to the presentation. The first part is a general overview of Miami Beach Jewish history. In the second part, we'll look at notable people and organizations that have played roles in the in Miami Beach Jewish history that don't fit neatly into the timeline. The whole thing will take about an hour. And I encourage you to leave comments below to provide feedback. This is only the second live stream I've done, and it's the first one on Miami Beach Jewish history. So, most importantly, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. A little bit about myself. Uh, I'm a volunteer for both the Miami Design Preservation League and the Jewish Museum of Florida, which is in Miami Beach. I was born and raised in northern New Jersey. When I finished school, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I was a budget analyst for the Federal Department of Education in Washington for 33 years. I retired towards the end of 2011. Just after I retired, I moved here to Miami Beach when I became a volunteer tour guide for the two organizations. And between both walking tours and stationary talks, I've done over 1,500 presentations in Miami Beach, including a little bit over 700 on the Jewish history of the city. So again, thank you for tuning in, and let's get started. So we have slides here that I'll click on. Okay, so you see the first slide here, Miami Beach shtetl by the sea. And shtetl is a Yiddish word. Yiddish, if you're not familiar with what it is, was the language of Eastern European Jews, sort of based on German with the Hebrew alphabet. And shtetl was the small villages that they lived in Eastern Europe. And over time, especially in the post-World War II years, Miami Beach was like a small Jewish village or shtetl by the sea. So turning to an overview of the Jewish history of Miami Beach, a key year in Miami history in general was 1896. That's when the railroad first reached the city of Miami across Biscayne Bay from Miami Beach. Miami and Miami Beach are separate cities. But Miami wasn't a city at that point. It was just a little village of a few hundred people, and there was no urban development at all here in what was to become Miami Beach. The coming of the railroad is what started the growth in the whole area. And back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, wherever the railroad went in the country, often Jewish people would settle. At the time, a lot of Jewish people were traders and peddlers and small business owners, and they would set up shop in the new railroad towns. And Miami was no exception. And of the first 16 businesses that were open there when the railroad came, 12 were Jewish owned. So that formed the first small Jewish community in Miami. And the first Jewish resident of Miami, you can see pictured here, Isidore Cohn, who owned a small business in the city. Miami Beach was developed and settled somewhat later, starting slowly in the 1910s, picking up pace in the 20s, and the population really exploded in the 1930s. The first Jewish residents of Miami Beach settled here in 1913. It was Joe and Jenny Weiss. They were originally immigrants from Hungary who first settled in New York. And they opened a business here, which still exists to this day. Some of you may be familiar with it, Joe's Stone Crab Restaurant, which is Miami Beach's oldest and probably best known restaurant. Here's a picture of Joe and Jenny Weiss in front of their original building, which is on the same plot of land as the current restaurant. In the early days of Miami Beach in the teens and early 1920s, most of the land here was owned by 3 different real estate companies who sold off plots for development. For the most part, 2 of the 3 companies, those headed by the people pictured here, Carl Fisher and John Collins, didn't sell to Jewish people because of anti-Semitism. Again, for the most part, only the 3rd company did so. That 3rd company was owned by 2 brothers, J.E. and J.N. Lummis. J.E. Lummis is pictured here. And especially in the early days of the city, there were other forms of discrimination. Some hotels didn't allow Jewish guests. Some clubs didn't allow Jewish members. The 2 pictures here, the one on the left is a real estate ad that talks about restricted development. That meant no Jews and no blacks. The other picture here for the Broadmoor Hotel, I think you're probably able to see it says catering to a Gentile clientele. But I think it's equally important to note that even though there was some discrimination both in Miami and Miami Beach, both cities were more open to Jewish development and settlement than many other towns and cities in that era. The first Jewish congregation was formed here in 1927. It was Beth Jacob, an Orthodox congregation, the most observant branch of Judaism. For 2 years, the congregation met in various buildings at the southern tip of Miami Beach. Then in 1929, they built the building on the left side of this picture, the first long-term synagogue in Miami Beach. In the 1930s, both the Jewish and general populations were growing rapidly. Jewish people started to get more influence in the city, moving into professional positions, becoming hotel developers and owners, and opening many retail establishments. By 1940, the Jewish population of the city was about 20% of the total. It's a pretty high figure. The Jewish population in the country at the time was only 3% of the total. Miami Beach elected its first Jewish city councilman in 1932. His name was Baron de Hirschmeyer. In 1943, it elected the first of its 18 Jewish mayors. His name was Mitchell Wolfson. Pictured here is Washington Avenue, one of the 2 main retail streets in the South Beach neighborhood of Miami Beach, with many Jewish-owned businesses. Some of them included, to give you a flavor of the area at the time, Thaler Brothers Bakery, Reisman's Delicatessen, Gutman and Beta Kosher Meats, Sunshine Kosher Market, Stone's Market, Alfred Eisman Bathing Suits, Hoberger's Photo Shop, and S.J. Friedman Jewish Bookstore. During World War II, which for America began in 1941, Miami Beach became a large Army training facility. About 500,000 troops passed through. There was no separate Army base. The troops were housed in the city's hotels and apartment buildings and used the city's streets, golf courses, polo fields, and beach to train on. It was actually the training facility for the Army Air Corps. There was no separate Air Force at the time, and it had an outsized number of Jewish troops. Pictured here is a Passover Seder held for the Jewish troops at Beth Jacob Synagogue in 1943. After the war, in general, in the Miami area, there was a huge increase in the population. The increase was driven by what's called the 3 A's. The first A was the Army. The troops may have been here in the winter when it was 75 degrees. Back home in New York or Chicago, it may have been 25 degrees. So after the war, many of the troops returned with their families, either as vacationers or working residents, or eventually as retirees. The second A was airplanes. Airplane travel became much more widespread after the war, bringing all of Florida closer to the rest of the country. The third A, I think, was the most important: air conditioning. Air conditioning was a rarity before the war, also became more commonplace afterwards, opening up the entire Sun Belt of the country to increased development. Excuse me for a second while I take a drink. Miami Beach shared in that increase in development. In Miami Beach, the increase was primarily of Jewish people. By 1950, Miami Beach was about 50% Jewish. The peak of the Jewish population here was in the 1960s and 70s. In that era, Miami Beach as a whole was about 60% Jewish. The South Beach neighborhood was about 80% Jewish. So in percentage terms, a tremendously high Jewish population. There was also a thriving Yiddish community here. Many of the people were immigrants from Eastern Europe from early in the 20th century. Yiddish was their native tongue. They were joined after the war by several thousand Holocaust survivors, and after 1959, several thousand Cuban Jews who fled that country after Castro took over. So there was Yiddish radio programming, Yiddish political groups, access to multiple Yiddish newspapers. Pictured here is a Yiddish theater that was on Washington Avenue between 12th and 13th Streets. There was also a big boom in tourism after World War II. That was epitomized by the 1954 opening of the Fontainebleau Hotel, pictured here, and immediately to its north, a year later, the Eden Rock Hotel. When the two hotels opened, they had two different Jewish owners, the same Jewish architect, Morris Lapidus, and in their early years, a largely Jewish clientele. Here's a picture of a newspaper from that era advertising various hotels. This one page had hotels both in the Catskill Mountains, which was the main resort for Jewish people in the summer. Miami Beach was the main resort for Jewish people in the country in the winter. So pictured here, if you're familiar with the Catskills, the ads include the Nevele Hotel and the Flagler Hotel. Pictured here for Miami Beach included the Kent Hotel and the Cardozo Hotel, which was named after the second United States Jewish Supreme Court Justice, Benjamin Cardozo. After World War II, almost all the new development and where all the big new resorts were located was not in South Beach, but one in one of the other two main neighborhoods in Miami Beach, easy to remember, Mid Beach and North Beach. And the people who settled in those neighborhoods after the war were primarily middle class and upper class. South Beach was pretty much fully developed before the war. The older buildings in South Beach lacked the newer amenities found in the buildings in Mid Beach and North Beach. So through the 1950s and early 60s, South Beach fell out of favor. By the mid and late 60s, it was a pretty rundown neighborhood. Many of the buildings had physically deteriorated. So in that post-war era in South Beach, The population, in addition to being heavily Jewish, had two other main characteristics. One, it was significantly low income. South Beach became a very, very inexpensive area to live in. Two, it was elderly. In 1980, the median age was 66, very high for a median age. So you could see here a typical beach scene in that era, a little bit different than if you come to South Beach today and take a quick glance at who's on the beach. Here are just two more pictures of South Beach in that era. On the left, they're both slice of life pictures. You can see the demographics from the pictures. The left one is in front of a popular fruit stand at the time, Big Chips, and you can see the movie theater was playing adult films. Next, we have what I think of as the iconic scene in South Beach in that era. The residents sitting on the front porch of their building. Whoops, wrong way. So keeping in mind the demographics here in that era, I have a poem to recite. And this poem was written by a Jewish Miami Beach visitor named Irving Zeman. It was published in 1954. It's called Lower Costs. The South Beach tans are deeper than what they are uptown. The prices here are cheaper as you move further down. So you can well stay longer and save your pennies too, while your shades of tan grow stronger and sand gets in each shoe. At 3rd Street is an outpost of Fair Lummis Park, where by day they roast and by night they spark. Octogenarians young once more, as they were some decades of years before. Although true passion may have been spent, they still need someone to help pay the rent. Matchmakers are busy, though not always paid, but getting some pleasure from matches they've made. Yiddish is the language as used in many lands. Informal conversation each soon understands. The jokester tells stories with gesticulations, and old folks enjoy his insinuations. Like youngsters, they laugh and forget they are gray, hearing the puns of a bygone day. So by the mid-1970s, developers got an interest in South Beach, wanted to knock down the old buildings and put up new ones. That's when the preservation movement began to save the old buildings. And the preservation movement was initially led by a Jewish woman, Barbara Kapitman. She was a designer from New York who moved here to Miami Beach with her family in 1973. And for the most part, the preservation movement was successful. Many of the older buildings were saved. And starting just after that, slowly in the early 1980s, picking up steam in the late 80s and 90s, there was a big economic revitalization here, also very successful. So now, once again, Miami Beach, including South Beach, is a highly desirable place to live or to visit. One of the leaders of the economic revitalization was a Jewish businessman, a developer named Tony Goldman. He was also originally from New York. He had a hand in the late 1970s of the revitalization of the Soho neighborhood in Lower Manhattan. He first visited Miami Beach in the mid-1980s and eventually purchased and renovated a total of 18 hotels. 18 was no accident. It's a symbolic number, high, meaning life or good health. While all that was going on, there was a tremendous change in the population. To jump ahead to the current day, Miami Beach is now about 15% Jewish, high by national standards, but low by Miami Beach historic standards. On average, the population is much wealthier. It's an expensive place to live and also much younger. The median age here now is 40, quite a difference from the 66 of a few decades ago. Two things happened to the people who were living here. One, by the 1980s and 90s, they were passing away in large numbers because of their age. Two, as this went from an inexpensive area to live in to an expensive area, many of the people couldn't afford to live here any longer and had to move away. So I just mentioned that Miami Beach is about 15% Jewish, much less than it was 60 or 70 years ago, but still a significant number. There's still an active Jewish community in the city. There's about 10 synagogues, about an equal number of kosher restaurants. There's the Holocaust Memorial, the Jewish Museum of Florida, excuse me, a large Jewish day school called the Hebrew Academy with about 600 students, pre-kindergarten through 12th grade, and as pictured here, an active Jewish community center. So that's it for the first part of the presentation, the general overview. Now we'll take a look at some notable people and organizations in Miami Beach Jewish history. It sort of goes quickly through them. They're grouped by theme. You'll see what I'm talking about in a couple of minutes. So first we have some prominent rabbis and their congregations. So pictured here is Temple Emmanuel. It was the first conservative congregation in Miami Beach, formed at near the beginning of World War II. And what's pictured here is their current building from 1954, which was patterned on the Great Synagogue of Algiers in Algeria. And also pictured here is a Rabbi Irving Lerman. He was the leader of the congregation beginning in 1943 for the next 50 years, 50 years. And he was an influential leader in the Jewish community, received many awards and citations for his achievements. He was a strong supporter of civil rights and promoted interfaith cooperation. Next is Temple Beth Shalom, which was the first Reform synagogue in Miami Beach, founded in 1942. Its leader from 1944 to 1984 was Rabbi Leon Kronish, who was a leader of Reform Judaism in America. He was a founding member of the Association of Reform Zionists of America. Next, we have Rabbi Moses Meshaloff, who from 1937 until 1954 was the spiritual leader of Beth Jacob Synagogue, the one I mentioned earlier, the first congregation in Miami Beach, an Orthodox congregation. Pictured here as an older picture of the two buildings. The larger building has a total of about 77 stained glass windows designed by Rabbi Meshaloff. Next, we have Bet Shmuel, which is also called the Cuban Hebrew Congregation, that was formed in 1961 by several of the Cuban Jews who I mentioned earlier fled that country after Castro took over. It began as an Orthodox congregation. It's now a conservative congregation. This building was opened in 1984, and its stained glass windows depict the 12 tribes of Israel. Turning to education, on the left is the Hebrew Academy that I mentioned earlier. Also, we have the Talmudic University, which provides lessons in Torah for all any interested members of the community. Next, we move on to markets and restaurants, of which there were many Jewish and kosher markets and restaurants in the city. On the left, we have Kaplan's Kosher Food Market, which was uh, owned by Norman Kaplan. He was born in Minsk in what was then Russia, now Belarus, and came to the United States when he was 13, first settling in New York. He moved to Miami Beach in 1944 and owned the market until 1971. He was very involved in the Jewish community, was one of the founders of Temple Beit Tefillah, and served as its first president. The other picture is of Saul Kallenberg. He was born in Austria in 1901 and moved to the United States, also settling in New York. That was in 1922. He had a butcher shop in the Bronx, but after being robbed twice, he moved to the safer confines of Miami Beach and owned a butcher shop on Collins Avenue from 1950 until 1969. This next slide is of the first restaurant in Miami Beach that served traditional Eastern European Jewish food. It was called Bernstein's Jewish Home Cooking. On the left, it was the building that it was located in, and on the right are three women in front of a sign advertising the restaurant. It was open from 1927 until 1938. Next, we come to the famous restaurant. That was its actual name, and it was well known. When patrons sat down, they were given, before they ordered anything, coleslaw, pickles, sauerkraut, several kinds of bread, and a bottle of seltzer. The menu included such Eastern European staples as matzo ball soup, stuffed kishka, which is beef intestine stuffed with a mixture of flour or matzah meal, chicken fat, and spices. And let me tell you, as an aside, it tastes much better than it sounds. Also, boiled beef flanken, which are now known as short ribs, and brisket of beef. In the late 1970s, the restaurant placed an ad in the newspaper saying that its shrinking clientele asking its shrinking clientele to please come back, stating that portions were now smaller. However, the ad didn't work, or not well enough, as the restaurant closed in 1981 due to changing neighborhood demographics and a general change in diet to lighter food. On my tours, everybody asks about the delis that were located here. Pictured here are three of the most famous ones here, all opened by the same person, Wolfie Kohn. We have Rascal House, Pumpernicks, and Wolfie's, which was probably the most famous of them. Wolfie's had two locations in Miami Beach. And unfortunately, all these old-time delicatessens are now gone as well. Next, we have, there were many cafeterias located in Miami Beach back in the day. Probably the most famous was the Concord Cafeteria, which was the last to close. That was in 1983. And Hoffman's Cafeteria, noted because it's a well-known Art Deco building. It was located in a well-known Art Deco building, which later became a well-known gay bar called the Warsaw. So, moving on to some architects, we have Henry Hohauser. He was one of the two most noted Art Deco architects who worked in the city. Art Deco being the style of architecture Miami Beach is most famous for. So he designed many of the hotels here, pictured as a typical small Art Deco hotel, the Congress Hotel. And then we have Morris Lapidus, who I mentioned earlier, the most famous mid-century architect who worked in Miami Beach. He was the person who designed Lincoln Road as a pedestrian mall. That was in 1960. Below is pictured Temple Menorah in the northern part of Miami Beach. That structure on the corner that dominates the picture here was designed by Morris Lapidus. The rest of the building was an earlier design by another architect. Next, two more mid-century architects who worked here, not as well known as Morris Lapidus, but they both made major contributions to the area. We have Norman Giller, and pictured here is the Caroline Hotel from 1957. And Gilbert Fane, who was born in Brooklyn in 1919, settled in Miami Beach in 1947 after his honeymoon. And pictured here is the Starlight Hotel from 1952. Miami Beach is noted for its colorful buildings. When these were first designed, they were painted primarily neutral colors. White was the most common color. For the most part, the colorful buildings didn't come into play until the early 1980s. And there was a Jewish man named Leonard Horowitz. He was heavily involved in the early days of the preservation movement here. He had the idea that if the buildings were painted multiple colors and the architectural details highlighted, more people would appreciate the buildings and thus help the preservation movement. So in the 1980s, he oversaw the painting of many buildings. He used a specific color palette. Pictured here was his color palette. And the very first building he oversaw the painting of was at the time Friedman's Kosher Bakery. Here's a before and after shot of the bakery. All of his work in Miami Beach was in the 1980s. After that, other people continued to paint the buildings, though not necessarily using his colors. The current trend is to go back to more neutral colors, especially white again, which is in line with the overall design trend in the country today. Next, we move on to a few hotels. So I think I said earlier there were many kosher hotels in Miami Beach at one time, meaning they served kosher food to their guests. The first one was the Nemo Hotel, which opened in 1921. And this picture is an ad for the hotel from the New York Post in 1944. And you can see it's if you could make it out. If not, I'll read it. It just says kosher cuisine. And the other picture is of a banquet at the Alamac Hotel, also a kosher hotel. This was a meeting of the Young Men's Hebrew Association. Moving on, we have the Eden Rock Hotel, which was also designed by Morris Lapidus. If you happen to live in the area or will be visiting Miami Beach at some point in the future, one of my favorite lobbies in all of Miami Beach is at the Eden Rock Hotel. So you might want to check it out. Then we have the Colonial Inn, which was a typical small motel in, not technically Miami Beach, but everybody called it Miami Beach. It's now what's in, it would be in Sunny Isles, if you're familiar with that, about 10 miles north of Miami Beach. It was called Motel Row. This was a typical one. They were all U-shaped like this. There were about 30 blocks of just motel, 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 motel. These were much cheaper than the large hotels further south. And the reason I picked the Colonial Inn was because my family came here for several Passovers when I was growing up. So it brings back a lot of memories for me. At least the picture does. there's almost none of these motels remaining today, including the Colonial Inn, which is gone. Beginning in the 1930s, South Florida was one of the draws of South Florida was gambling, both legal and illegal. In 1944, 5 Jewish Miami Beach men formed the S&G Gambling Syndicate, and they came to control gambling in many Miami Beach hotels in that era. And it was illegal. It wasn't big time gambling like you might find in Las Vegas today. It was often in a room just away from the main lobby, or if the hotel had a swimming pool, in a cabana near the pool. In 1948, the S&G Gambling Syndicate took in $26 million, which would be about $300 million in today's money. So quite a successful outfit. And there's an anecdote that in that era, one could walk up and down Collins Avenue listening to horse racing results, because a lot of the betting was sort of like illegal betting on horse racing around the country. One could walk up and down Collins Avenue hearing horse race results from radios blaring from open windows in hotels up and down the avenue. The S&G Gambling Syndicate was put to an end in 1950, largely through the efforts of Mel Richard, whose picture you see here. He was a sort of a crusader against the illegal gambling, and through a series of events, including getting the United States Senate involved, the S&G Gambling Syndicate was put to an end, and much of the illegal gambling in the city ended, though not all of it. Next, we come to Rose Weiss, who was part of the second Jewish family to reside in Miami Beach. It was Rose and Jeremiah Weiss and their children. They moved here in 1919. And on the left is Rose Weiss in front of the building they resided in. The Weisses owned the building. They lived in one of the units and rented out the rest. And over time, the more prominent family member came to be Rose Weiss. Her nickname was the Mother of Miami Beach. And in the other picture here, she's standing in front of the official flag of the city, which she designed. She also coined the official motto of Miami Beach, which is no longer in use, which I like a lot: forward with caution. In addition to doing those things, she attended every Miami Beach City Council meeting over a period of 38 years. She was the volunteer head of the city's welfare department before it was a paid position. She did a lot of relief work after big hurricanes that hit Miami Beach in 1926 and 1935. And during World War II, she raised more funds selling war bonds than any other woman in the state of Florida. So quite an accomplished person. Next, we have a couple of sports figures. So there's a well-known boxing gym in Miami Beach called the Fifth Street Boxing Gym. And it was opened in 1950 by two brothers, Chris and Angelo Dundee. Angelo Dundee was a very famous boxing trainer. His most famous trainee was Muhammad Ali, who did a lot of the training during his career at the Fifth Street Gym. And he won the heavyweight championship for his first time right here in Miami Beach. He defeated Sonny Liston for the title. The fight was held at the Miami Beach Convention Center. And while he was training here for the fight early in 1964, the Beatles were on their first visit to America. They made only 3 stops: New York City, Washington, D.C., and Miami Beach. While they were here, they paid a visit to the gym. So far I've mentioned 7 people in connection to the gym. the two Dundees, the four Beatles, and Ali. None of them were or are Jewish, but I do have a Jewish connection to the gym, Benjamin Evil Eye Finkel. Evil Eye moved to Miami Beach in 1938. He lived here till he passed away in 1985. He had two careers, the second of which was based out of the Fifth Street Gym. His first career was as a boxer, but he only had a few fights. His boxing career did not really amount to anything. He's more noted for his second career, which was based out of the gym. And it was said that what Babe Ruth was to baseball, Caruso was to opera, and Charlie Chaplin was to the movies, Evil Eye Finkel was to the hex. For $50 to $300 per fight, he'd be hired by a boxer to put a hex or a spell on his opponent. He also used his powers for baseball games and horse racing. And there was a big article about Evil Eye in Sports Illustrated magazine in the 1970s. Sports Illustrated called him a boxing legend, a rascal who mixed 2 parts voodoo with 1 part fraud and lurched through life unburdened by honest labor. Next, we have Skip Bertman, who in the 1950s played baseball and football for Miami Beach High School. He was the Miami Beach High School baseball head coach from 1965 until 1975, and his teams won 1 state championship and were runner-ups 2 other years. He was also the head baseball coach of Louisiana State University from 1984 until 2001. His teams won the college baseball championships 5 times, and he was named a National Coach of the Year also 5 times. So quite an accomplished sports figure. And finally, to wrap up this presentation, just a look at several cultural institutions in which Jewish people played a prominent role. First, we have the Holocaust Memorial. I mentioned earlier several thousand Holocaust survivors resided in Miami Beach. The entire Miami area had about 25,000 Holocaust survivors, and through their efforts in the 1980s, Miami Beach's Holocaust Memorial came into being. It opened in February 1990 with Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel as the guest speaker, and the sculptures, this is the main sculpture pictured here, but there's other smaller ones, was designed by Kenneth Treister, and this one is called the Sculpture of Love and Anguish. Then we have the Bass Museum that was founded by John and Joanna Bass, who were Jewish immigrants from Vienna, Austria, and resided in Miami Beach. They were art collectors, and in 1963, they donated to the city of Miami Beach 500 old master paintings, textiles, and sculptures, with the stipulation that a museum of art would remain open in perpetuity. The building is pictured here. John Bass was the director of the museum from 1964 until he passed away in 1978. The museum now primarily has temporary exhibits of international contemporary art. Next, we have the New World Symphony, which was founded by Michael Tilson Thomas, also pictured here. It's an institution for gifted young musicians. And he was the Academy's artistic director, now director emeritus. He's also the grandson of the noted Yiddish theater actors Boris and Bessie Tomaszewski. And finally, we have the Jewish Museum of Florida, which was, I mentioned earlier, it's housed in what was Beth Jacob Synagogue. The synagogue closed for good in 2005 because the Jewish population in the area was decreasing through the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. The membership at Beth Jacob was decreasing as well. In 2005, it had only 22 members, and with membership that small, they didn't have enough money to continue. So the museum has been here now for more than 25 years, and it's a noted, well-known addition to the Jewish community here. So that's the end of the presentation. Just a couple of things before we totally wrap up. Most importantly, I'd like to thank you for listening through the presentation. Again, feel free to make comments below, provide any feedback. Also, like if you care to, please like the channel. And I think that wraps it up. So again, thanks for listening in. And I'll probably do one of these live streams again. So it'll be again on Eventbrite if that's where you found it, or on Facebook. So if you know anybody who might be interested, feel free to tell them about it. So again, thank you very much and have a good evening.